beautiful people, and welcome back. You know the man, Coach Mike James, you know the brand P&Z Life Coaching, and I want to thank you for coming back to the channel. Welcome to another Impactful Conversations. I want to invite each of you to subscribe, like, comment, share, things that jump out to you. Give us feedback. I want you to interact and make sure you connect with my guests. All that info will be in the description below. But without further ado, I want to give my awesome guest an opportunity to just introduce yourself to the people. Let them know who you are, any kind of background information or starting information that you want to give.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mike. I'm so excited to be here. So I am Gabbie Lanier. I'm a certified life coach, and I call myself a social anxiety life coach. So in my work, I empower other professional men and women, people of color who might experience self-doubt and anxiety, and I help them to kind of like step powerfully into their work, whether that means speaking up, showing up, being authentically present. And then just taking action in their life. And I'm just so excited to have this conversation, tell a little bit about what I do, and then also just what's driving me to do this work.
Yes, thank you so much, Gabbie. So everyone watching, of course, y'all know I'm biased already to my guests. I love coaches. As a coach, I think for the most part, coaches are world changers and some amazing people. And the people that I'm connecting with through what I do has just been awesome. Gabbie and I have already spoken and talked, and I'm excited to bring this interview to my audience and just to share some of the amazing things that you're doing. So I love to start impactful conversations in the same place. So I want you to take us back. So tell us about young Gabbie, or what is that thing or some things that you think about in your childhood or your background that was impactful for you, or what got it started and that impact that it has as a child growing up. Tell us about young Gabbie.
Awesome. Yeah, I love this question so much. And I just want to say like one thing, because I do a lot in my work. I just want to tell you what's showing up for me right now. I'm so nervous, but I'm also really excited because I can be nervous and still say what I want to say and really connect with you and have this conversation. So I just wanted to say that really quickly.
Thank you.
And I love this conversation. I love this question because I think that, our younger selves, they show up today, in lots of different ways. And when I was thinking about this, I journaled a little bit. One of my earliest memories, and it's almost kind of like someone told me it, and so I think that it's a memory, but I'm not totally sure, is, as a kid, I used to be morbidly shy, so shy. I wouldn't really talk to people. I wouldn't even really talk to family, outside of my little circle, my mom, my dad, and my brother. And my mom tells me that when I was in kindergarten, I was so shy. My kindergarten teacher didn't think I could talk. She thought I was a mute. And, during teacher conferences, she said, I really think that Gabbie might need to be in a special needs classroom because we just can't get her to talk. We don't think she can talk. And my mom started laughing, and she said, no, she can talk. She just doesn't feel comfortable talking to you. And so, I've heard that story a lot. I've heard other versions of different stories of just, how epically shy I was as a kid. Right. And for me, I don't think the shyness really bothered me so much in terms of, I didn't think there's anything wrong with me. But when I got older, especially in college, that's kind of where it really hit me. Is when I really started to suffer from this condition called social anxiety. And there can be kind of a spectrum, but in college, it got bad to the point where, I couldn't go out beyond going to classes. I could do that. But I'd find myself often running away from college, going back home on the weekends and just kind of hiding myself, just so afraid that I'd be rejected, never knowing what the right thing was to say. And then when I was kind of at the end of my college years, and I was sad that I couldn't like go and serve in the military. I was really wanting to serve my country, and got denied. But then I decided, okay, well, maybe I can serve my country in a different way. So I ended up joining the Peace Corps, and I got assigned to El Salvador, which was really exciting. And I am half Ecuadorian, so I, kind of learning more about that kind of Latin culture was super important to me, and becoming more fluent in Spanish was super important. So I went there, which for a person who has social anxiety, like that was a challenge. And I just, I found myself, like my social anxiety got pushed to its limit. And I found myself at a point where I was just not sure if I could help other people at that point, because I was in so much need of help myself. And I actually felt like this sense that, not just because of the language barrier, and not just because I was surrounded by people I didn't know, I felt like in a way, especially with other Peace Corps volunteers, that I was actively excluded. I felt this sense of being isolated and excluded. And for me, like that was kind of like my worst fear. And I really had to kind of meet that fear head on. And there's a specific thing so this is the last little thing I wanted to share with you, like this kind of like bridges that gap for me, is when I was in this village, and I saw this little girl. She was around 5 years old, and her name is Esperanza. And she was just full of so much life. And she was so to me, like just so beautiful. She was very outgoing with me, asked me lots of questions, would kind of just like hang on me. And I saw her change over the span of a year. She went from this like super vibrant, lovely little girl to being very like closed off, very like shy, uncertain. And I saw that happen, and it really broke my heart. And I remember like I would sit in my host family's house, and, they'd be preparing me food in the morning, and she'd sneak in along the wall. And she'd be kind of like hoping no one would notice her, but I would always notice her, and I'd say, Esperanza, come over here. Because what I saw was that she was really mistreated by so many people, like actually out, like directly excluded, because she had a hump on her back. And she also had very dark skin. And the way that people treated her was just, to me, like totally unacceptable. And I did my best to try and reach out to her. I would just like hold her on my lap, and I would tell her, that I loved her, and I loved spending time with her, and I'd invite her to do things. And so I was making this very like overt gesture to include her and love her unconditionally, and just like be present for her, because it didn't seem like anyone else could do that for her. And so for me, like that's also like a little girl memory for me, because she felt like a reincarnate of like my younger little girl self. And so ever since then, I've just been super committed to creating community, where I'm actively including people and being present for people and seeing people, like providing that space for them to be seen is extremely important to me. So that's kind of like that, to me, like really speaks into the work that I'm doing now as a coach.
That is so, I mean, man, Gabbie, I was listening to that story, and I went to almost, if I was reading that out of a book or seeing it in a movie or documentary, that compassion and the person you are. I brag on the people that I have these conversations with, and the people that I connect with. It happens organically. It's not one of those things where we have to force it, and in the conversations, exchanges we've had, that compassion in the person inside of all of us, and that we let blossom, that good, if we allow it, right, is just awesome. I heard some things in that when you were telling that, and that question is your background, and impactful things to you or moments in your childhood. And it's amazing how you tie those two together. But what I heard when you were telling the story of that young girl and even yourself is the importance of the message that kids receive, right? And the adults that are caring for them in their lives to give them a voice. Because when you said that, where your mom responded to that teacher, like, no, she's fine. She just doesn't want to talk to you, or maybe she's not comfortable with you. That's huge because, Gabbie, think about it. How many kids didn't have that parent or that adult to speak for them and say, no, they don't need any special assistance. They're quiet or they're just this way. And so I think that was beautiful. And going back to the space you made for that young girl is amazing, because that's something that she can take with her. At least Gabbie, someone saw the good in me and that beauty. So wow, that connection was just, that's what I got from that. Like, man, that's a book. That is beautiful. Oh, we're going to get to your coaching and your approach and all of that. But in thinking of that, you talked about the Peace Corps, but what else is it, thinking about your childhood and just that growth over time to an adult? What does impact mean to you as an adult now, as you think back to, past experiences, even up to this point? What is impact for you as an adult, or what does that mean to you?
Yeah, gosh, I feel like just being able to, and I would just like reframe this as like, or frame this in the sense that when I was younger, I really didn't feel like I could help people so much because I couldn't help myself,
Mm,
And I feel like that kind of goes both ways. To help others, you need to help yourself, and to help yourself, it actually is great to help others. So like with Esperanza, like I was helping her, and in doing so, I was helping myself. And actually, I just had a conversation with another coach from that same program that I graduated from CICL. And she pointed out something for me, which feels so true. And she said, Gabbie, in the work that you're doing, you're recognizing the wounds that you experienced. And so you can have deep empathy for yourself and for others who have that same experience. And you, through this work, are healing your own wounds by healing others. And to me, that was so, so, so true. And one of the ways that I do that is through, so I'm not necessarily like a religious person in the sense that, I say like I'm a Christian or I'm, a Buddhist or whatever. Although I do attend a Unitarian Universalist like community church. But I believe powerfully in this. I call it a ministry of presence, where I can show up for somebody and help them be seen and listen to them, and provide this space of non-judgment. And when I attended that program, the coaching program, it really kind of like just reminded me in this really powerful way, because that's what coaching does, is we provide
right.
this presence, this like profound presence for another person. And in that way, and in that like one kind of like action or mindset or space you're giving someone, you can make such a powerful impact on their life, because you're empowering them to do that work themselves. But they need that space. They need that like loving support, that like sense of unconditional love and presence. So for me, like, that's kind of what I think about when I think about impact in the work that I do.
I love that approach. That is true impact, allowing someone to, however you word that, but allowing someone to tap into that power, to tap into that inner voice, that
Yeah.
positive voice that can, because that voice that hangs out a lot of times in here is you can't do that. Who are you? Who do you think you are? You going to do this? You're going to be this coach that's going to change people's lives. But that inner desire and that heart, getting to the heart, creating that space is so impactful, right? And that's one reason why I say I'm so biased towards. Now, I can back that up a little bit, Gabbie, and say maybe I didn't always feel this way, but the more I enhance my skills as a coach, and with all the training I'm doing with CLCI and facilitating, the more I connect with other coaches and I see the model, that's truly why I say I think coaches are world changers. Because again, creating that space for someone to blossom and just tap into the power that's already there. Most of the times, if you think about that, how much is that suppressed? You can't do that.
So
You
much
can't
so.
do this.
Yeah.
So that I so agree with you there. It's just so impactful to be able to give someone that opportunity, that place and space to be able to grow and blossom, into who they truly are or who they want to be, right? Wow, just it's amazing. Now, so certified life coach, and the connections and really tapping into people and just giving them that space to blossom. And we talked about kind of that young Gabbie and then that impact as you were older and what happened with that opportunity being in the Peace Corps. So talk to me about your approach with coaching. Tell me more about that.
So I take that experience with me into my coaching, and when I really, because I've been coaching now for a couple of years, originally I came at the coaching with this perspective as I'm a board certified behavior analyst. That's kind of the work I do by trade that I've been trained to do, have been doing for the last 5 years. So I approached coaching originally with this idea of I was the expert and I know how to create behavior change, right? This is what I've been trained to do. And I also was trained in this other approach called acceptance and commitment therapy. And once I learned about that, I was able to look at kind of transformational change and see it from this behavioral lens and see it from this other lens of really working through the mind. That's kind of what ACT does. ACT is the acronym for acceptance and commitment therapy. And so I had these two approaches. One was heavily behavioral, so talking about like outward behavior. And the other one was like heavily kind of cognitive mind work. And then I discovered traditional coaching, which really is exactly what we've just been talking about,
Right.
non-judgmental space, really empowering that person, trying to come from a place of curiosity and really the best work, the best results and outcomes come from a person who creates their own goals, so in this kind of supportive atmosphere, but really they explore what they care about and then they go forth in the world and do that work. And so for me, like I come from those 3 different frameworks. And when I really looked back at the work that I had done, because I'm just constantly tinkering with my own behavior and wanting to kind of just continue to expand my boundaries and what I can do and what impact I can make, I had this really profound realization, and this was this last winter, is that all of this work I've been doing on myself, the thing that has shifted the most in me is this social anxiety, which had kind of just felt like was strangling me for a long time. And it's been loosening, right? But it's still there. It's still a fundamental part of my experience. And so knowing what I know about ACT, and that kind of framework of how to navigate some of this pain and discomfort we have as humans, because pain is and suffering is universal to humans because of the fact that we have this beautiful brain of ours. And knowing that, I know I can never fully take out this experience of social anxiety, of all of these things that I've ever experienced, because it's not like it's some sort of cancer that I can apply chemotherapy to. It's part of me,
Right.
But moving forward, I can look back to the work that I've done and say like, wow, I've really gained a lot of skills in being able to navigate the discomfort of social anxiety, those thoughts, those feelings, those sensations. And through that work of just, and I never even did it totally on purpose. Like I've had to do that work because of the fact that I wanted to help other people, because of the fact that I became an entrepreneur and had to put myself out there and fully confront my own social anxiety. Like being an entrepreneur has been a personal growth journey for me, because I've wanted to do things that have been outside of my comfort zone. And, I've done them, and I've gone through that work because of the fact that I'm navigating and fully confronting my social anxiety, in all of the different ways in which it is infused into my life and into all of the behaviors and patterns of thinking that I have about myself. And so in my work as a coach, I use those different frameworks, and I help people who experience anxiety or experience social anxiety in this fundamental way. And even though they might, be able to be professional, have jobs, be, successful on the outside, on the inside, they do not feel like they are their authentic self, and are constantly spending all of their energy suppressing or trying to make the social anxiety go away, or the self-doubt, or however that might manifest for them, as an introvert, someone who might describe as an introvert. And be able to take the tools and skills that they can learn through coaching, in this kind of supportive setting, where they can kind of navigate through that toward goals they actually really, really, really want. If they were to put all
Yeah.
of those kind of like barriers and self-doubts on the table for just a minute, if they were to like really think about like, okay, if this goal wasn't just a should, it was like, I vitally need this in my life, and if I could powerfully step into this role, like I could really like do amazing work. And if I could powerfully do this work in my own personal life with these relationships, or the way in which I see myself, like it would make all the difference. Like that's when they recognize for themselves, like, okay, I'm ready to do this work. I want to do this work. I'm going to do this work, even though it's uncomfortable. And then slowly
Yeah.
you expand your boundaries of like what is comfortable, whether it's that social anxiety, self-doubt, you continue to expand. And in doing so, like you even more so fully step into that authentic self.
Wow, that cliche, but that is beautiful. Just that whole two things you said that just jumped out to me. You said, navigating, but not only that, you followed that by saying confronting, like fully confronting where you are in that path, right? And dealing with, everything that's there, and being able to get to the point where you feel comfortable being that your true and authentic self. That is a navigation, especially if there is some, if you're introverted, or if there's some social anxiety, different things there, or you're used to suppressing your voice, right? So that is amazing. So act inspired coaching. So that person said, man, you know what she's saying is jumping off the screen to me, resonating with me so much. What about that person that says, I hear that, but is that necessarily for me? What are some other things that, or other, situations that you think people can really use your approach to coaching?
Yeah, well, and I've been thinking about this a lot, because in the past for me, the work was, I was searching for someone like me, basically. Um, 7 to 10 years ago, when I was having a hard time even showing up to work, going to a
Mm,
meeting, expressing my opinion, later on it showed up, like my boundaries did eventually kind of expand, but it was more like, how do I ask for that raise? How do I tell someone that I want something deeply, when I feel like it's not what everyone else wants? As an example for myself, I've had to have many, many, many difficult conversations in my personal life, to go from having like really deep, painful rifts within my own family structure, to going from that to accepting and then being willing to have these relationships because they're so important, they're that important to me, so that kind of change. And then also what I've noticed showing up lately is how incredibly difficult it is to be an entrepreneur when you are an introvert, and putting yourself out there and just simply telling people what you do. It's so hard. And every day it's like, I've seen these shifts happen in me where I'm like, I go from saying, this is what I think I want to do, to I'm going to do that thing, but I'm not going to tell anyone about it, to like, okay, now I'm showing up and I'm starting to do the work, but I'm only going to tell people who are safe, to, I'm going to start doing this work and I'm going to be telling other people, and I'm going to start telling people what I do in other more kind of like passive ways, to now I'm at a point where I am doing the work, and I've intended to do this work of powerfully stepping into my identity as a change maker, a coach, someone who is introverted and yet powerful. I call myself a vibrant introvert, and I put those two words together because
Nice.
it is empowering to say, like, I can have these two things which might not seem synonymous, and yet they work in harmony together. They describe how I want to show up in the world.
Wow,
So
that's incredible. When you said this, I've never heard that. Man, that should be trademarked by you, vibrant introvert. That's amazing. And when you said empowering, that's the first thing I thought about. Like, that's powerful, because it goes back to when we talked about your authentic self, right? It fully acknowledges the whole of you, of who you are. Like, this is what I need. And one thing too that I think is awesome, going from difficult conversation to impactful conversation, is that a lot of times I love that journey, because you talked about telling the safe people, right? Getting to that point, but the people who need what you have, they're the ones they're in the background, right? Because maybe they're not even in that place or speaking that, hey, I need that. So you putting it out there, it gives that, we've mentioned your authentic self. I tell people all the time, and I encourage people, show up and be and bring your full, authentic, and unapologetic self. Because when you do that, there's this beautiful way that what you put out into the universe, it comes back to you. So the people who need your message, need your service, need what you have to offer, need your networking and your connection, they will just gravitate to you because you have offered your full self. And that's been all the connections I'm making here lately. And the more I embrace that, the more connections I'm making. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. So Thank you for just sharing that with me. Act Inspired Coaching. Now you could just stay there and say, well, I'll coach. I'm going to put myself out there more, and I'm doing the work and everything. But you've taken it a step further. And tell me about your amazing podcast and what inspired you to do that, and what was behind that, and kind of where that's going.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the podcast, because I was like, okay, I really want to mention this because it's fitting into this story, right?
Yeah.
And you said earlier, oh, you told that story. I feel like you could have written it in a book. I've gotten so much better at telling stories, because the podcast that I started about a year ago in October, and I wanted to tell stories to teach this framework we've already talked about called acceptance and commitment therapy. I've heard a lot of podcasts out there. I listen to a lot of podcasts just like you. And what I have heard a lot of is like people coming on as experts telling how to do it, like, oh, this is what this is how you do it. But that's actually not how most people learn, like really, really learn. You learn through story, and you learn through direct experiences. And so I wanted to present a new type of platform where, people could share a story and other people would listen to it and relate to it and connect to it and then learn something from it, maybe differently than what I had intended them to learn, or differently than another person would. And then over time, what I discovered, because this has been a personal growth journey in and of itself, is after I started to share stories, and I'd shared my own story, a lot of pain came up for me because it's hard to share. It's hard to show up and talk into a microphone, but as I started telling other people's stories, like I found so much connection and value in it. And then I started to recognize, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe I'm doing this, coming from a person who, was like terrified to talk in college, who would never raise her hand. And then when she occasionally did, she would berate herself for saying the wrong thing. And now I just say what I want to say, and as a behavior analyst, I am not doing the traditional work a behavior analyst is doing. Most behavior analysts work with autism, and I have chosen to do this whole other work with a different population in a totally different way. And over time, I've been feeling very empowered, and I realized, like, I want to do the same work that I've been doing for myself. I want to allow other people the platform to speak up and share a story and to say what they want to say, because everyone has something to share, something deeply personal to them that other people can connect to. And so lately, I had just recently changed the name of my podcast in April to the Vibrant Introvert, so that I can use this as a platform to empower other introvert voices and stories, to then inspire other introvert people who are listening as the audience.
Wow. So what is your process of people to come on to your, because I love when you said, so many podcasts, a lot of times they bring in the expert, right? And a lot of people who are searching, they're not looking for the expert, they're looking for the experience. Like, tell me about what your day-to-day is, what I deal with, like, it's something about telling someone, do this, do that. It feels like more work on top of what you're dealing with, right? So I love that, not the expert, but the experience. So what's your process, Gabbie, for people that come onto your podcast or your guest, and how do you reach out or find people that you have those discussions with? And by the way, let me just say this, pause, Gabbie. Of course, Gabbie will give that information, but I think I told you the first day, if it's a new podcast someone tells me about or presents to me, I want to go back to the very first episode. And two reasons, or a few reasons, but the major two reasons is, one, I want to know the backstory, the story behind the story, or why they're doing that, if they give an intro or whatever. And the second part is because I want that authentic person. That first time, it's raw. It's like, should I push the button? Yeah, is this real? Am I really doing this? Am I going to put this out? I want to connect with that because it helps me. For me, it makes that connection of almost that relationship of truly knowing who I'm listening to, if it's going to be, in my list of podcasts. So the first episode was just awesome in the way, again, I reached out to you. Then I think the next day instantly, in how you told your story and how you really invited your audience into who you are. So yeah, I just had to put that in there. That was a plug that I wanted to put in there. So yeah, what's your process and your guests and the people that you talk to?
Okay. So I think this is a really good question, specifically because of the fact that with the podcasting, it's like, oh, I'm going to do a podcast, but what does that actually involve? It involves speaking into a microphone, which is difficult for me. Talking is difficult. It involves reaching out to other people. It involves having conversations with other people. So when I first started this process, it was incredibly difficult for me to have a conversation with someone, to reach out, to follow up, to schedule, to do all these things. I've gotten better at it over time. Like I definitely have more social skills now than I did way back in college. But I still found it very hard. And over time, I've really, like, the practice of it has been so powerful for me. It's been like exposure therapy, in that
Mm,
every 2 weeks, I put out another podcast, I'm telling another story, I'm reaching out to more people, I'm interviewing and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, I wanted to say that um, I have had people reach out to me, though not that many, directly to share their story. I've more often than not, like, I've reached out to others because I've recognized, like, oh, we really connect, we would have a great conversation. Or a lot of my interviews come from Instagram, actually. I'll read a post someone says, and I'll say to myself, like, wow, that's so powerful, I would love to know more about that. And then sometimes I'm in a conversation with someone and just randomly ask them, like, would you be interested in telling your story on my podcast? I had a friend who had breast cancer at a really young age. Um, and we got into conversation about her story. And I said, I want you to just tell me your story. So we got on the phone. She talked for 2 hours. And afterwards, she's like, wow, just being able to tell my whole story in its entirety
mm,
and not be interrupted, just tell my story. Like, that was incredible. And then she ended up coming on and we did a formal interview and she told the story again. And it is empowering for that person to tell it, because, like, how often do you get to just say what you want to say and have that platform? Someone's asking, so interested in you. Like, for me, I feel incredibly supported and, like, empowered talking to you, having you ask me questions about my work. And recently I've been reaching out to total strangers too, where, I'll look on Google, I'll get these, like, Google alerts on my email every day, and I'll read through articles about introverts. And I found a woman in Trinidad and Tobago who is a journalist and an author and social justice, for a restorative justice advocate in the prison systems. And so she came on and told her story, and she is the most introverted person I've ever met, like, self-avowed introvert. And so she told me her story, and it was just so fun. But as soon as we broke the ice, like, we went from surface level conversation, to very deep conversation. Like, that's what I found that I enjoy, is going from the chit chat elevator talk to the, talking about real important things that are deeply meaningful. And that's just been
mm.
so delightful for me.
Wow. That's the true definition of energy, right? Energy, vibrations, aura. It's something about going into a place or space when you just don't feel comfortable. And the minute you get there, it's like, this is not going to be good. I don't know. But I think one thing in that is people sense that energy, and
Yeah.
what you do creating that space and just holding that space, is amazing. And people feel that comfort, and it's amazing what will come out, with
Yeah.
someone, like you said, an introvert or someone who doesn't like to talk. Holding that space is amazing. It goes back to what you said about the friend. How often do I get a chance to share my story? Especially if it's somebody who's close to me or that I know, when they're interrupting me, or it's like, oh, well, yeah, you'll be okay. But actually listening to my story. So that's awesome. So, Gabbie, take a moment and just tell everyone how they can find out more about your podcast, and also how to connect with you. Any information that you want people to have, because I definitely want people to connect with you and see your approach, and just definitely the podcast and what you do, and even to find out more about your act inspired coaching, because I think it's amazing and something so needed now. People would think that in this time we've been experienced with this pandemic, that it would, you know, be one of those things where maybe it would change and it will make it easier for introverts or people who are not wanting to be out there. But even in a virtual setting, sometimes it's harder, because now, look, everybody's looking at me, right? So I think what you're doing is so amazing and so timely as well. So tell everybody how they can find out more and connect with you.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I totally agree with you. And I just want to say one really quick thing. My husband, who is a radio producer, I randomly clicked on the radio the other day and he said 50% of people have quit their jobs. And I heard this other piece of information. I was reading it online, how compared between introverts and extroverts, the data are showing actually, this is not what people expect, but that introverts aren't doing as well as we would think they are, that mental health wise, not doing as well. There's this huge change happening in our society right now, huge change. People are seeking connection and they want to feel comfortable in their own skin and they want to do work that is meaningful for them. So I know that this work is needed. I do powerfully think this is timely right now. I just have this sense that like there's people out there searching for this support, this work, whether it's coaching from me or from any life coach. Anyways, so the way that people can connect with me is on my podcast. It's called The Vibrant Introvert, and you can find it on iTunes and a few other places, Spotify. My website is actinspiredbehavior.com. And I provide coaching. I have one coaching package. It's a 6-month coaching service. So you can book with me online and talk to me for 30 minutes, experience a little bit of that coaching and also ask questions. And so those are the two main ways. I'm also on Instagram, Act Inspired Behavior, actually very active on Instagram. And it's been one of the ways in which I've been pushing myself socially, to get myself to put myself out there because it matters. And I want to connect with people. So you can instant message me on there as well.
That's awesome. Awesome. Listen, Gabbie, I want to tell you, thank you. Thank you for taking your time to do this. I appreciate what you're doing. Again, it's no mistake because I believe in manifestation and just what's supposed to happen will happen. So it's no mistake the connections I'm continually making. So when we first connected, I was like, yeah, even in class, it's just something about your energy, what you provide and what you bring, what I sense. So, you were saying how even this conversation is timely. So it's just that feeling of some good stuff that's coming your way and the things that you're doing. So I'll give you again the floor. I'll turn it back to you. Anything that you want to leave the people with, any message, any last thoughts or anything, the floor is yours. If there's anything else that you want to add.
Yeah. Well, and I just posted it on Instagram this morning, but I have been doing this work myself that I am doing the work of stepping into the person I want to be, of being that fully authentic Gabbie. And earlier in our conversation, I stated, I feel nervous. I feel sensations, like just being able to have this conversation with you. But to me, like to be able to navigate through that hard stuff, amazing things can happen from that work. And I just invite people to ask themselves, like, what do you need? What is important to you? And what can you do to powerfully step into that work as well? So that's what I want to leave people with, because I think everyone can do that work and the world needs them to do that work.
That is beautiful. Gabbie, I'm writing myself a note that I got to share with you. So give me 1 second. What you said is just, again, amazing. And thoughts come to mind as you speak and you're talking about that. So like I said, thank you again for this. I'm definitely going to make sure I put all the ways you can connect with Gabbie in the description below. I want to take the time out to say thank you to everyone that's watched anything on the channel. Thank you for coming back, for watching this. Leave some comments. What stood out to you? What is something that's a takeaway for you? Let us know, and please connect with Gabbie. Thank you again for watching another episode of Impactful Conversations, and we will see you next time.